Hello, my name is Sasha Zar, and I'll just be presenting my Tableau, I don't know how it's pronounced, project, and all my visualizations, including the data, dashboard, and story, just all the requirements. So first, I just wanted to start off going over the data. It's pretty straightforward. It's basically just a rundown of the insurance company and its sales, considering its contribution margin, price, variable cost, the specific salesperson, date of sale, just all the basic information you'd need to be able to analyze their sales and their profits and all that stuff. So with that said, I'm gonna lead into my first visualization. Let me just move this down so you guys can see. So my first visualization, I decided to do a map just because I knew that I wanted to involve the states, and I just feel like when dealing with states, it's just the easiest to do a map because, as you can see, it's just very explicit, not very understandable. It's kind of hard to get confused in this format. So I knew that that's why I wanted to start off with a map. So basically, for my first visualization, I just wanted to get an idea of the data, and I knew that I kind of wanted to deal with the contribution margin just because that's just basically how I can tell how I can tell the performance based on each state, and that's what I wanted to figure out. I wanted to see which ones were thriving, which ones were underperforming, and things like that. So basically, I started off with just a filter, an average contribution margin filter. As you can see, you can change around and see like which states have like a lower one, a higher one. So right now I just wanted to put the scale on high and just see everything in general. So I added a color for the average contribution margin. As you can see, what it's showing is the darker states have the higher average contribution margin, while the lighter states like Arizona, Minnesota, all these have a lower one. And I also obviously wanted to label the states, so I added a label. And if you hover over each state, it tells you the average contribution margin as well as the state. So I just thought this was a simple way to start out and just be able to lay out the data and just look at everything clearly. So from this, I wanted to kind of narrow down the data and try and figure out the performance and kind of narrow it down to why they're performing. Some states are performing better than others. So for my next visualization, I also chose a map for the same reasons that I mentioned before. I just feel like when dealing with states, it's very explicit, it's clear, it's easy to understand. So for this one, to be able to narrow it down, I knew I wanted to narrow it down to figure out which insurance types are underperforming, basically, which ones are harder to sell, which ones have a lower average contribution margin. So what I did is, first of all, I added a filter for insurance types. So if I just wanted auto, I could just click auto, and just vice versa with all of them. But here I just left it as all. I want a whole scope of all of their insurance types and their performances. Also added a region filter just in case someone wanted to narrow it down or put the information that they sought easily. I also added an insurance type color to the color so that you can see which insurance types are visibly showing in an easy way. So what I did was I set the contribution margin bar to the lowest contribution, average contribution, to 306, just because I felt like that was a good scope on which states were underperforming. And I also added the salesperson so that if you hover over, you can see which salesperson is responsible for this specific contribution margin. So basically, this is just I wanted to set this as a visualization so we can lead on to kind of discovering which salespeople are responsible for these low margins and which insurance type are underperforming or are being sold at a slower rate. So that leads us into my next visualization, which is basically the lowest performers. And I also wanted to include months so you can see which months are thriving, which are underperforming, and this just kind of narrows it down a little bit more, not just from salesperson, but the specific months that they're struggling with. So from here, I kind of just looked at all the salespeople and just wanted to get an idea of who is underperforming. And basically the names that popped up the most for these underperformers were David, Paul, and Soima. So here in this graph, first of all, I showed a graph just because it can easily show the dips in, as you can see, in the months or just in their sales performance in general. So for example, like David, his highest peak when it came to, as you can see, blue is auto and the green color is life. So if you wanted to see his highest performance in auto, you could see that it's $395.35 when it comes to average contribution margin. And something I noticed, what this specific visualization kind of showed me, were the months that seem pretty consistent from this data, for which months are underperforming. And as you can see, there's a huge dip in almost all the graphs, that June, July, August, and September are kind of the lower months and clearly the hardest to sell, at least for these three performers, or these three sales people. So I also, as you can see, you can like filter them out to how you want. Like these are the sales people I focused on just because I noticed that they're underperformers. So if the company sought to, they could easily just analyze the data for other salespeople as well, or different insurance types and so on. So here I just wanted to keep the average contribution like full scale from lowest to highest, and I just wanted to see everything that they were doing. So basically what this data taught me is which months were underperforming. And then for my next visualization, leads into it pretty well, just the highest performers. And I'll explain more about this in my dashboard, but basically I have a filter for the salespeople and the average contribution. So I set it to the highest, which is 1,086 all the way to 1,218. And what this did is it just took the highest average contribution margins and gave me these four high performers, which is John, Mike, Peter, and Cigar. So in my dashboard, and obviously you can filter it how you would like. And for my dashboard, I wanted to explain a little bit more about my higher performers while looking at both, just because I feel like these two you can compare very well. Like for example, if you want to look at Suyama's highest average contribution margin, it is set at $397.1. And let's say you wanted to look at, even if we look at the lowest, even Mike's lowest average contribution margin is set at $1,086.16. So you can see that there's a large jump between Paul's highest or David's highest and their highest, because they're all set over 1,000. So clearly this kind of showed that there's some sort of deficiency going on when it comes to David, Paul, Suyama, and others that I didn't include in the graph. So basically I can explain more of this in my story, but let me get to that. When it came to my first map, basically what I described earlier just shows the contribution margins by color, very easy to understand. You can adjust the average contribution margin as you'd like, which leads directly into the map that kind of depicts the least insurance type sales and the salespeople that are responsible. And then I'm just leading you through the story so I can kind of tie in my recommendations for this. So this is what I mentioned before, just I wanted to show the largest drops in sales and kind of analyze it to be able to understand which months are lacking and which sales, and the three sales representatives that I focused on. And like I just explained, the highest salespeople as well. Here I'm just showing the highest performance, the highest performers. And basically as you can see, the issue is when we go to my dashboard is that the price or the average contribution margin for John, Mike, Peter, and Sagar are just drastically larger than the low performers. So basically, what I'm kind of suggesting is for the company to kind of move around and reposition their salespeople for certain months. Like as you can see, as I mentioned before, June, July, and August are the most underperforming months, especially for auto and life insurance. So I believe that if they repositioned, let's say, the best sellers just for those 3 underperforming months and just switch them around, it could overall just lead to a higher efficiency for the whole company, not only an average contribution margin, but just in general. So I think that it would just make it overall clearly it would just help out the lacking insurance type sales, which would overall lead to more profits and just in general, yeah. So just higher efficiency. And so what I liked so much, I just wanted to share what I liked about the project and what I learned about the project. What I learned is, honestly, I think I learned a lot about the features of Tableau, not just the ones that were required in the other in the Tableau 1 project. But I just think, first of all, I absolutely think this is the most amazing way to display data in any way. I kind of see it as just a very simplified way of kind of Excel in a way, because it has a lot of the same features. You can do a lot of the same things. And personally, I'm a very visual person. I learn from looking at things, and that's just how my brain understands it best. So I thought that this project and being able to actually understand how to use the filters and all the other features is really going to help me in the future, because as I said, I'm a visual person. And yeah, overall, I also really appreciate how I just wanted to thank you and tell you that I appreciate how you allowed us to kind of, in our Word documentation, talk about our struggles and what exactly our brain process was through this whole thing. I feel like that helped me a lot, just knowing that just knowing the understanding of the project and things like that. And sorry, let me just put that there. And when it came to one of my biggest obstacles when it came to data, and since I mentioned that I'm a visual person, I just feel like the way that Tableau is set up, it helped me understand the data in ways that I probably couldn't have in Excel, just because, for example, I had a lot of trouble understanding contribution margin, variable costs, and just how they all tie together. And just looking at the data, you can easily see that the variable cost and the contribution margin equal the price pretty much. So the variable costs are just the costs that the company is spending to basically be able to sell the insurance or whatever product it might be. So I feel like this really helped me understand the data and helped me and led me to my solutions and just everything in general. So yes, this was my Tableau, how it's pronounced, 2 overall project. Thank you so much.